Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Handy Randy Show. In the studio with me today, Ken Manda. Ken is a owner of multiple vehicles and a car lover, another car guy.
Absolutely, love cars.
You have a bunch of them.
A whole lot of cars, from Fords to Corvette to King Midgets, the best. You know, Crosley, yep.
And
Fiat.
Well, yeah, you still have your Fiat.
I still got my Fiat yet too.
Now, as a Fiat, we can't no longer call them an independent because they're kind of hooked up with the big three now.
Yep, they are.
So it might be a little difficult to sneak the Fiat Spider into the independent car show at Summit Racing this year.
Yeah, it might be tough.
Might be a little difficult.
But you know, it's got some age. So the older ones are of one thing, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll just stick with the Crosleys and the King Midgets.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about is when I say independent show, this year in August the 22nd, it's at Summit Racing in Talmadge, Ohio, which is on Interstate 76, exit 29. On Saturday the 22nd, they're having their Studebaker, Packard, and Independent. I think it's like the 23rd year they've been doing that.
I think so.
It's amazing.
Yep.
And the King Midgets participated in that. Was it for the first time last year as the Independents?
Yeah, I think so. Last year was our first year for Independence. We brought a car once before when they were at the other site. And but last year was the first big year we had big participation in cars.
Yeah, you had quite a few,
Yeah,
quite a few King Midgets show
Yeah.
up, and we've invited your club back again, the King
Right.
Midget Club. And I say your club, you're the Ohio Region President
Regional
of the King
president,
Midgets.
correct. Yep.
And we've invited the Crosleys to come, and there's quite a few of those around.
Right.
And by proxy, we can't call it an Ohio car. Ohio owner, the guy that owned the Cincinnati Reds.
Well, remember,
Powell.
Crosley did start in Ohio, Cincinnati, and then they moved across the border.
I see.
So, you know, it started out, it was originally
evading Ohio taxes or something like that?
I don't remember what it was. The first year and a half he was in business was in Ohio, but then the war came and he went out for a while and they came back in again. That's when he started across the border. So.
And great big guy, 6'5".
Yep.
The Powell was the owner of Crosley. He owned the Cincinnati Reds.
Cincinnati Red, Crosley cars, Crosley refrigerators, Crosley radios. That was he made tons and tons of money in his radios and his refrigerators and all that stuff. Cars was his toy.
Unfortunately, the car thing dropped off.
5 years.
That's all.
That's all, 5 years.
But they built a lot of cars in that 5 years.
He did. He claimed to build the most affordable station wagon, which they built tons and tons of those little station wagons. So.
And small, not as small as the King Midgets, though.
Well, no, just a little bit larger. Not a whole lot larger, but a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. But they seem to be worth a whole lot more. The price on a Crosley is kind of expensive to get a nice one, especially.
Yeah, it depends if you're, you know, the wagons and like the regular two-door, the hardtop convertible, they call it, where the top goes down, those don't seem to be the most sought-after cars. The Hot Shots and the Hot Shot Sport and the little truck, those bring big dollars. So, but,
And they have like a farm utility vehicle as well.
Right, that brings a lot of money too. It's cool. It looks like a little Jeep. It's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a Jeep.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are a couple of the Independents, and of course you've got the Henry J's, which was another smaller car.
Right.
And I don't know whether the government was asking for small cars. Certainly wasn't an issue on gasoline back then.
No, I mean, we were at, what, 10 cents a gallon, 15 cents a gallon back at that time, so gas was dirt cheap, so.
Kind of looking at maybe a little commuter car.
Right.
That even Mama could jump in it if she needed to go down to the Acme or the Giant Eagle. I don't think they had Giant Eagles back
I don't
then.
think so. I don't think they had Acme's neither.
But she could jump in her little car, room enough for a bag or two of groceries in the passenger seat.
I think a lot of the little car market, you really go back in that time and thinking, it wasn't the car of the size for the gasoline. It was, remember what people made back then? You know, $4,000 or $5,000 a year was big paycheck. So the little cars were affordable little cars. You know, people didn't have to have they were only going transportation, from place to place, and they were for affordability, and those cars were very affordable. Cost-wise, they were down a lot. So
You had mentioned to me that someone had the bright idea that maybe this would be a kind of a cool golf cart, that they could use this to drive to the golf course.
the King Midget.
The King
Correct.
Midget.
Correct. Yeah,
That
69.
kind of blew up though.
Well, because a golf course was in business to rent golf carts. And if you let them come in with their car on the golf course, who says you can't let this next guy come in with his car, and the next guy that ended pretty fast. That was a short-lived.
So maybe they didn't think that whole idea through.
I think they were doing that because they were striving at the end to try to survive.
I see.
And that was one of their tactics to try to survive, and it didn't work.
All of these stories, and there's a million of them.
Sure.
And a million Crosley stories, a million King Midget stories. And if you would like to know more about these things, all you have to do is talk to an owner, and they know all the stories. They know, right?
Yeah. Especially when you get around a lot of us of our age, that we grew up with a car, from the popular mechanics, and you follow that stuff for so many years. You talk to a lot of younger people and don't even know what the car is, don't even know where it came from or nothing. But we followed these cars for years and years, and you get a lot of knowledge of them.
And they were very affordable.
Oh,
the
sure.
original two owners of King Midget, at least, they built on request.
Correct.
So they weren't overstocked.
Right.
They just built on orders.
It didn't get overstocked until the last 2 years when they sold out to a conglomerate. They started car dealerships where they had 40, 50 cars sitting on the lot. And then, of course, our good friend Ralph Nader came in. After the King Midget, he went after Corvair, he went after Volkswagen, he went after everybody. And it was tough for them to survive. And then you also got to think about 1969, King Midgets were selling for $1,200. For $1,200, you could buy a Falcon, or you could buy a Chevy 2. So there's a larger car. You could drive all winter long. The King Midget heater. King Midgets had a heater, but it wasn't the best. And it's one-wheel drive, chain drive. So you really had to look at their time. It passed. And they didn't build a car that would accommodate the newer stuff that was coming out, and so that helped. I mean, between Nader and a few of the other stuff, it wasn't much to take them down.
But it's still neat though that we can go to car shows and see these cars pretty regularly.
Yeah, I think these car. If you look back, like we've talked in the past, of car companies that started here in the state of Ohio. I mean, in Cleveland. Oh my gosh, so many cars were built here, and the history goes on and on and on, and we'll never see that again today.
We're talking about that independent car company, and when we come back, I've got a video I want to show you, and when we come back, we want to talk about that and how we're reaching out to try to bring some of those independents to that car show on August the 22nd. We were fortunate enough to have a nice Saturday a couple weeks ago, and our friend Spike Man, the DJ, had a big car show at Red Ferris Chevrolet. Now it's only Chevy, not Chevys alone, Buick and Cadillacs as well in New Philadelphia. And the Corvette Club was hosting the event, and we were, again, fortunate enough to have a nice day. We took our cars and drove south for a change. Usually we're in our area, we go west or east or maybe north a little bit, hardly go south, and we found a lot of new friends and even some cars that are somewhat familiar with us Canton cars. But this is the show that we participated in just a couple Saturdays ago at Red Ferris dealership in New Philadelphia. So Chuck, let's throw some music on top of that. I've got it narrated, and we'll spend a few minutes visiting Red Ferris Car Show. Enjoy. We finally had a beautiful Saturday. We decided to jump in the Wayback Machine and drive down to New Philadelphia to Red Ferris Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac. And for the Corvette Club down there had a car show. and we took the camera down and we strolled around and took a look at some of the cars. Started off with this beautiful 69 Mach 1 Mustang. This is a pretty special car because it's got a 428 Cobra Jet engine in it. Yeah, serious. Not a lot of those around. That car sold new for $3,500. It's worth a little bit more than that now. They also had 351 Clevelands, I think was the other choice on these. And then the regular Mustangs, you could get the 351 Windsor Cleveland built engine. So there was the 351 Cleveland, I should say. The 351 Windsor, which is a smaller, looked like just like the regular 289. Nice old 40 Ford, Challenger, a 67 or 68 Cougar. You don't see a lot of these, and the reason for that is basically the Cougar, was a Mercury, and because it was Mercury, it was more money. And basically the same car. It had a nicer grille and it had the sequential tail lights, but why buy a Cougar when you could buy a Mustang for less money? Speaking of Mustangs, this is a 65 fastback. Now you can find 65 hardtops. Not a lot of money, but the fastbacks are probably double the money. And back of this Corvette is a Citroen. Not too sure of the color, flesh color. Hannibal Lecter. And Citroen made in France. Not a lot of these around. It's funny, I saw two in the same weekend and I don't remember seeing any in 10 years. One of them was at the bomb shelter in Akron. The owner of this, I mentioned him, I had just seen one, and he knew the guy. He said, well, there's not a lot of them, like 6 of them in Ohio. The finest riding car you'll ever ride in, the owners tell me. Hydraulic suspension, and you won't be in a limousine that rides finer than this Citroen. Charles de Gaulle loved this car. Not the prettiest car at the show. Grand Sport. Camaro. Corvette. Nice Trans Am. Orphan car. No more Oldsmobile, no more Pontiac, so now they're officially orphan cars. So you won't go out and buy yourself a new Trans Am. Next to that, there's Pops. Snooping around. Do not touch other people's cars. Oh, what does he do? Well, I left the keys in the ignition. You think someone's going to steal it? 26 T-bucket truck with a 425 Cadillac engine. You haven't seen one? Pretty unique. Speaking of unique, how about this 63 Avante? Studebaker Avante. This is a real McCoy. There's only 800 of these built. And this one was completely renovated by the owner. Beautifully done. I remember I saw my first Avante when I was about 12 years old and my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe how modern and how cool the car was. You couldn't have a car show if you didn't have a 57 Chevy. This one's nicely done. It looks like it's got all stock interior. Camino large block, mini horsepower, 454, it's like 577 horses. Really nice 68 Firebird, one of the top 20 award winners. '68. I don't remember when they came out with the 350. This is either a 326 or a 350. I think a 326. I know they used a 326 in the 66 and the 7. I'm not too sure 68. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. Believe me. Roush Mustang, beautiful Camaro, new generation Corvette. 66 Impala came over from Columbiana County, I believe. #1 selling Chevrolet of all time. I think they sold 2 million. Unfortunately, the ones that were sold in northeastern Ohio didn't last too long. The frames rusted out in this part. The 65 and the 66 had frame issues. Our friend from Worcester is the owner of this beautiful SS Chevelle. I think he's had this car his whole life. There's Pop's Grand National. I sometimes accidentally call them Chevelle, Grand Am. Mustang. These 3 cars here were some of the top cars in the show, and I believe this Chevy won, 56 Chevy won Best of the Show, which he wins pretty regularly, along with this 40 Ford from him, with the flames on it. This Nova was short, and the frame was short, and made it into a 4-door into a 2.5 door. Take another look at our 40 Ford. He was another top 20 award winner. Now look at that left rear door on this Nova. A lot of fabrication went into that. Crazy. Trans Am, nicely done with the accent, the copper accent throughout the whole car. From the engine to the interior. Trunk, hood. Now take a look at this intake manifold. Old school, cast pot metal, cast iron. This is before the Edelbrock aluminum high-rise. That's what you had. Weighed a lot. Weighs a lot. It still weighs a lot. Not like it doesn't weigh anything. It still weighs. You know what I mean. Nice old Model A. Besides that, there is Larry Patrick's at El Camino. That's for sale, by the way. Larry Patrick lives in Doylestown. And I know, I was at his shop, and he's putting his car together in his garage at home. Nicely done. Cuda and a Coronet. This show was put on, by the way, by the New Philadelphia area Corvette Club. Here's some of their cars. They weren't in the event, but there's their cars parked outside, along with this beautiful '66, one of my favorite all-time Corvettes. And we end up this portion of the show. Hi, welcome back to Handy Randy Show. We're in our brand new studio. It's already a new studio, but now it's even newer and different. Thanks to you and Mr. Lyons. Tell us about this beautiful studio. It's very cool.
Well, it's Chuck's design and had to put it together. So, you know, we built the desk, and like I said, we never build anything from the top down. It's from the bottom up. But he designed the top first, so that's how we had to
Well,
build
he
it down.
had in mind what he wanted with a desk that the
That you
guest
could talk back and forth to each other instead of the old way when we sat side by side and you had to turn and look at each other, which, you know, this accommodates 3 people real comfortable. You can get 4 in here too.
Yeah.
So,
And part of that problem of sitting side by side is the side camera was hitting my nose
Right.
and the brim of my hat
right.
during the conversation. I don't think people wanted to look at the profile of my nose.
Probably not.
Now, we were talking earlier, as we bounce back from Red Ferris, we are going to have Don Morgan on the show.
Right.
Pretty soon we're going to talk about his big event, one-day event at Summit Racing.
And he's going to talk about Studebakers.
Oh, he'll talk about
And
Studebakers.
so what we got
Till your ears bleed.
Yeah, I know. But what we got to remind him is, remember the Studebakers that he loves and goes after started out as horse and buggies. They
Yeah,
were wagons. Remember?
That's true.
They
Well,
started,
they're pretty close to wagons still.
probably, yeah, they are. But we don't want to talk. We don't want to break his heart. But yeah.
But that Studebaker Club, the Ohio Region Studebaker Club, sponsors the show.
Right.
Pays for the advertising. Their volunteers run the whole show. They invite Packard because Packard was part of Studebaker at the end.
At the end, that's
very
correct.
end.
Yep.
And then this year they've put an emphasis on independent cars. And they've said, let's take a look at clubs like the King Midget Club.
Correct.
That there's not a whole lot of those cars that really can afford to do their own car show.
Right.
But if we invite those independents and the Crosleys and the Henry Jays, and then I contacted John Shapiro. John owns the Cruisin' Times magazine and does a Cruisin' Times TV show, and invited him to come to the show this year. And he just did a 2-part series in his magazine about the independent car companies from Cleveland that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And there was a bunch of them.
Right.
Peerless was one, the Witten was another. Those 2 come to mind. The Franklin, I think, was a regional car company. And if you take all of those independents, and they're, maybe a handful, Hudson's,
White.
the white car company.
Sure.
If they're not large enough to really to have their own car show.
Correct.
Now they can have their clubs,
Sure.
but how many, can participate, because there just weren't that many of them around.
Right.
So if we say Hudson's, please come to this show, there might be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 Hudson's may show up. Now if you take each club and multiply that, heck, we might have 100 independents at this show.
Correct.
And that'd be cool.
Well, that's a good thing because I think then, a lot of these small car clubs, as like the King Midget, we can't put on a car show somewhere because, well, mostly everybody doesn't want to sit around. They want to ride their cars. They want to drive them. So this way here in Hudson and all those guys, if there's only a few of them left and a few of that, you group them all together. Actually, a lot of the younger people can start seeing cars that really were here in Ohio and understand it, because when everybody thinks about cars, first thing comes to your mind when you build a car, where do we go to every year to see cars? Detroit, okay, because everything was built in Detroit. Well, no, it wasn't. Detroit was really the after of all the real companies starting out. And the younger people just, they don't get to see this stuff because it's not out. And so if you have that massive amount of cars at one location and you got a lot of people coming in to see, that's going to open a lot more people's eyes, and hopefully open a lot of younger people's eyes that they'll get more involved now, and we can keep this going as the older guys start passing on, which is a real problem.
Big problem, and it's needed.
Right.
And we also mentioned earlier that you have an opportunity to learn about these cars because the owners know about those.
Sure.
And what we hope people will do, we hope spectators will come to this show, not only for the Studebakers, not only for the Packards, but all of these independents, and bring the spectators in, and they can find out these wonderful stories. Because believe me, if you talk to that Hudson guy, he's going to tell you about the Hudson. He's going to know about the Hudson, everything about it.
Sure.
The history, the engine, how well they did it in NASCAR.
Right.
Back in the early 50s.
Well,
they were the kings.
Hudson Hornet, there was nothing, you couldn't beat it.
Right.
You know, and so, and you go get around a lot of these guys today that are racing cars, Hudson Hornet won car. They can't believe that, you know.
Right?
but,
They
you
look
know,
at that big bathtub.
Yeah,
and they
that's
go,
what it
no
was.
way.
It was a big floating bathtub, but it was a winner.
It was a winner. It had a bulletproof engine,
Yep.
and it was fast. And believe it or not, so were the Studebakers
Sure.
in their day. They were fast cars. I hate to admit it, but they were. They had some pretty powerful engines. That 289 with the turbo
Right.
went fast.
Well,
and they still do.
And when you're out in the car world today, and you mentioned 289, what's the first engine everybody
Ford.
thinks? Ford, because Ford was 289. They didn't realize that Studebaker made one also.
Right.
You know, and then Studebaker's motors, like you said, they were tough motors. It's too bad at the later years that they had to switch over, you know, and go to General Motors.
Yeah.
But because their motors were those old flathead 6-cylinders that were in the Studebakers and the Larks, you couldn't kill those things.
Nope.
They would last for eternity.
So we're going to see all of those shows and all of those cars at this show. And one more time, it's going to be at Summit Racing, which is located on exit 29 of Interstate 76, just east of Akron. And it starts at 11 o'clock, and we want to invite you all to come out and visit Ken, see the King Midgets, see the Crosleys, see the Hudsons, the Willies, the Ramblers.
That's one we forgot to talk about, was Willys.
I know. The list goes on and on and on. There's so many. And the Willys was built in Toledo. So that's another, still built in Toledo, even though they're part of Chrysler. So the list goes on, and we can go on and on as well. But we encourage you to come down that day. Mark it on your calendar. 11 o'clock is when it starts. Spectators, there's plenty of parking. You can go inside Summit Racing.
Yep, they got a lot of cool stuff in there for sale, memorabilia stuff, and just all kinds of cool stuff.
Good food, good music,
food, yep,
and good people. That's all coming up August the 22nd, 2015 at Summit Racing. Hope you enjoyed this edition of the Handy Randy Show. We want to thank Red Ferris Chevrolet in New Philadelphia for, again, hosting the car show, and we'll see you next time right here on the Handy Randy Show.